Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name's Cinnamon Evans. I'm the CEO of CERES, and it's my great privilege to just provide a few very brief opening remarks tonight before I hand over to Genevieve, who will facilitate this discussion. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that CERES is located on the country of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my deep respects to elders past and present, and to First Nations people here with us this evening. I am very grateful to be having this gathering. As someone who's worked at CERES for more than 3 decades, I am often the person who's been around the longest, but tonight that is definitely not the case. So I'm very excited to actually be here, and I'm also excited to be here in this room. So since this building was opened in 2010, it was actually our staff offices for until about 2023, I think it was. And so I always imagined opening it up for events like this, where people can come together to have meaningful conversations about our world, our community, things that are important to us. So it's very exciting to be here with you all tonight as well for that reason. Genevieve really brought the spark of inspiration for a project that's about documenting the origin story of CERES. It's a bit like a river. The source is not just one place, it's many places. And how do we capture that narrative and think about all of the little streams that over time trickle along and then come together to become a bigger thing like a river? This gathering is really just a beginning of that conversation on that journey of documenting that story. So I'm also overwhelmed by how much interest you've all shown in coming along tonight to hear from this lovely group of people. It's a bit breathtaking, actually, and it signals to me quite strongly that we need to do more of this kind of gathering. Somehow it's captured everyone's imagination and a curiosity about what it was like at the beginning and what we need to know for the future. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some magic tonight. And so I would like to hand over to the very excellent Genevieve Timmons, who will moderate tonight's discussion. Genevieve asked me not to make a fuss over introducing her, but I just would like to say that Jen was CERES' first employee ever.
Thanks, Cinnamon. Can you hear me all right? I've got a Madonna-type microphone on. Yes, me too. We love it that you've all come, and it's just such a terrific atmosphere for us to think that there are not going to be 5 people sitting there listening to 6 or 7 people. I want to add my acknowledgement of country. Thank you for your acknowledgement, Cinnamon. And I think for me, it's very significant that our 60, 80,000 year old culture has relied on storytelling. And these days, our First Nations people say, remember where you come from. And I think that's one of the cultural strengths that has driven this kind of commitment to say, let's remember where CERES came from in a very small echo of a very strong cultural approach. So I want to acknowledge our First Nations people and also celebrate how good is it that we have a treaty in Victoria. For me, woohoo! So we have a collection of people here tonight. We also, in getting some discussion going around this, there are a few people who have passed away who were there at the beginning, and I hope over time we can assemble a bigger list than we have now. But the people who came to mind for me were Roger Lamb, who was the city electrical engineer in the building next door, and he saw that alternative technology was a great move. And that was a pretty important contribution for CERES because he could have been the opposite. So Roger Lamb, Walter Green. I don't know if Jem is here, but Walter and Joy, who've both passed away, were here at the beginning. Every day doing the animals or, you know, whatever it was, they particularly, and I think there's a memorial stone for Walter somewhere in the CERES Park. I'll have to go and see if it's still there. Alfred Sultana, who was part of the Maltese community that came in with seeds and grandchildren and played bocce and shared their culture. And Alfred's wife is in care now, but she's very keen to know that we're all thinking of Alfred. And Alan Rogers, I recently heard had passed away, someone from the RMIT network. Melbourne Uni, yeah. So let's keep thinking into who are the people, us here today, but the people who have passed and the people who are going to be ahead of us, which is what I think the acknowledgement. I remember hearing one First Nations man say, I need to say it's the past, the present and the future regularly. So I remember there'll be people coming after me and there are people who've been here before, but this is our time. So let's use it well. We've got the panel here and this group of people have agreed to talk, and I know personally that they will come from a very early spot in the history of CERES. And Liz Burns, you're here and one of the first staff people. Do you want to sit in the spare seat? Come and sit up, come on. Yoo-hoo! So that means we've got 3 out of 4 of the first staff team. Graham Harpley's not here, but he might be at the next one. I'll apologise in advance. I'm going to be Madam Lash. And Jerry tells me I was always Madam Lash, but I'm a bit surprised. I thought I was quite kind. And so just to start, let's get a feel for the room. Hands up anybody who came from within, say, a 5-kilometre radius of CERES. Give us an idea of your geography.
Just tonight?
Tonight, yeah, tonight. Okay, now hands down, who's from regional Victoria? Who's travelled? Oh, look at this. Interesting. And then we've got interstate. Anyone? Jerry? Yep, there we go. Julia, of course. I don't think we've got anyone from overseas or have. Oh, New Zealand. Oh, yes, you're just back from Singapore. Beautiful. Also, what we thought we're going to get you to do really quickly is we want to know from you how long ago you first heard of CERES and became involved. So have a quick think. Do you know the year? And we're going to ask you to show each other what that looks like. So who's here from the first, like just this year, 2025? Any newbies? Great. Would you mind taking this sheet?
Yeah, sure.
And go and stand. Are we going to go to the courtyard? What do you think? Or maybe go and stand at the back on the left. And then who's... Yeah, we wanted to start with the fresh. Anyone 21 to 24? Here you go, take that. And people who are the same year, go and stand with that gentleman. 2016 to 2020. Thank you. And go and find your person standing in a row so that we've got the most recent all the way along. 2011 to 2015. Where are you? Anybody? Yep. 2011 to 2000. And if you can line up so that it's chronological, that's my Madam Lash. 2006 to 2011. Anybody? Thank you. Be the bearer. 2001 to 2005. Yes, thank you. 1996 to 2000. Sita, can you just see if we can get them in, maybe into the courtyard?
Yeah.
Yeah. 1996 to 2000. Any takers? Yes?
Well, not really, no. I've always known about the series, and we moved to Melbourne in 96, but we were not
Take that one.
actually involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I was going to go to the very first because it's really, I was at one a little while ago, a couple of months ago.
Okay.
Theatre.
Thank you. 1991. Thank you. 1886. I'll get to you. 1986. Yes, thank you. Ah, 86 to 90. 86 to 90. No takers. 81 to 85. Yes, thank you, Trudy. And 76 to 80. 81 to 85.
Oh, this is beautiful.
What are we doing in? Well, I was on
in a circle of our
We've got that picture of the gate.
sneak in there, man.
For 1986. Julie's there. Okay. Well, what we're going to do. Oh, that's an idea of and the continuity, and Cinnamon talked about the river flow, so I think that whole sense of people flowing around like this. Thanks for doing it. Bring your sheets back in. Have you got enough photos? So just to add, Hattie was in this year, and Chris just said to me, there were a few younger people that he asked were they coming, and they were like, oh no, it's an AGM or something. And Sita said to me the other day, she asked somebody, were they coming, and they said, oh no, that stuff's all so boring. The history, the founders. But no, but you see, that's not what we're doing tonight. What we're doing is the intention is that we create momentum for the next 50 years. In talking with Cinnamon and Nicole and Sita, it's pretty clear to me from last year, CERES has got a strategy, a newly minted strategy. It's got a 50-year lease just signed, and woohoo! And there's a fundraising strategy that's just been launched called Keep CERES Humming. And so the questions we were looking at were not, do they need more ideas? In fact, Cinnamon said to me, CERES is a magnet for new ideas, and it's the last thing we need is more ideas. What we need is to understand better what it's going to take for CERES to flourish and to get in behind the practical stuff. Yes, let's get the money in, absolutely. And CERES, I've got my just put in a bit of a plug, Savvy Giving, which I wrote with support from the Inner North Community Foundation and Australian Communities Foundation. And CERES is one of the great ideas that worked that I put in the book, because when it started, we had the momentum, we had the commitment from people, we had the engagement of people streaming in the gate to come and help plant the trees, clear the land. We want to know today, what is that we can continue to build and create? So not ideas and practical, but what is it that's kept people committed? What's the alchemy of CERES? And you've already demonstrated it, so we love that. Thank you. The earliest years were largely invisible for me. When I started finding out how did CERES talk about itself, I realised it was like almost when the gates opened was when it started. But in fact, the earliest years were about before the site was secured, and there were men and women pushing against doors to say, we think this is a great idea. We've got 8 acres of disused tip site. It's in a suburb with second lowest ratio of green space to people. There must be some way we can convert this into something valuable for the community. So it was quite a radical time, and I would call it systems change for the philanthropy and the grant makers. I would say this is systems change, and it's continuing. But it is more than nostalgia to just build the history, and how we share a better understanding of the alchemy of what brings us together is the key to what will build the humming for the fundraising. It will build the value of the lease being used completely for 50 years. There's no question that CERES will not be here in 50 years. So we crafted these questions, and the panel's been asked to make comments on them. I don't know if they will. They're very disobedient, some of them. But the questions... Yeah, well, that's right. So the questions are, what are the most important lessons for us as CERES advances in 2025? What were the barriers, mistakes or failures that we can learn from? And I put here, there's a crack in everything, that's where the light gets in. Because Leonard Cohen, thank you. But there's always room for improvement, but it's not criticism, it's where's the crack, what can we do? And then what were the highlights and strengths that kept people focused? What of these are relevant today, or would they only happen then? Can we repeat or find a new form for that engineering the momentum? And we're calling the session Past Lessons, Future Impact. So it's not just history, but in the making of the conversation, we're obviously going to find out more. I think we'll get started on the panel. So yes, if that's all right. Now, Chris Ryan, I'll just tell you who these people are. We won't go into a lot of detail with the introductions because they'll have used up their 3 minutes anyway. But Jerry de Grease is here from Tasmania. He'll tell us about his business. He took the photo of the first working bee at CERES, and has continued to work in place-based development. Alice Aird, you'll tell us when you first heard of CERES, but Alice was babies in arms and pushing critical pieces of machinery around the site and moving concrete blocks, and also heard about CERES when it was the earliest idea. Chris Ryan, Chris told me that I have to shut him up, so I'm ready to be Madam Lash with Chris because he regularly talks about CERES as an example of the sort of community building and place-based development. RMIT, you can tell people more, but in the early days, the work Chris did was to bring the universities into the space of how CERES would progress. Then Bruce Hedge, one of the first team with the 4 of us as the staff at CERES, and Bruce has this magical voice and was on 3CR on a Sunday morning, so he would talk about the working bee, and suddenly all these people would walk in the gate with stars in their eyes going, where is the working bee? So among many things, Bruce was a great mover and shaker in getting communication out. Liz, you came along at a time when we needed more women, and I believe you're still involved with...
You actually invited me because I was involved. I was working at Fitchburg Community Health Centre involved with setting up community gardens in the 70s, and you were talking about setting up a community garden as a focal point for CERES. I just came along to give a talk, and
we wouldn't let you go. Yeah. And Liz has just jumped on tonight because we needed another woman and we had a spare chair. But Liz, well, and Liz can talk about the questions. Gil Freeman, how do we talk about you, Gil? You had Compost in Northcote, a housing complex that was a mini CERES in a lot of ways, and bringing in the education elements of CERES. So at the time we had council, we had universities, we had community organisations, and we had people who lived around the area who all, there was this perfect positive storm that brought it all together. Now I'm going to stop talking, and we've got a microphone. Is this well? We're going to, yeah, well, it's up to you. Chris is going to start. Can you take the mic?
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Chris, you take it away.
Okay, thank you, Genevieve. Yeah, that's true. You can't see from the back. Okay, yes. I'm going to cover these questions very obliquely. I arrived back this morning after 6 months away from Australia, working from Australia, Asia, Europe, and I can remember UK because they're not the same anymore, on a project called Field Stations for the Future. So community hubs for regenerative action and regenerative connection. And I mention that because as that network of partly universities, partly cities has come together, I have been showing CERES for the last 6 months all the time as an example of just to stimulate people to think about their particular opportunity for a field station for the future. And what came up in that discussion was something about CERES as a model. And my response to all of that is CERES is not a model. There's not an idea that here, a blueprint we can pick up and add into Amsterdam or Cardiff or Lund in Sweden, because CERES is absolutely rooted in this place, and all of those field stations for the future have to be rooted in their space. And so I began to think CERES is really a living thing. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit. So excuse me, I'm not going to really deal with the questions. And see, she told you. It seems to me that you have to talk about the DNA of CERES. And we've been talking about the DNA of those projects, and it's come out of thinking about the DNA of CERES. And DNA has 3 strands. And I'd like to say the 3 strands are hope, connection, and purpose. And like all DNA, those 3 things are intertwined, and it's not possible to talk about them separately. I'll return to hope in the end much more, because I think it's absolutely critical to now and to what that international project's about. But if you think about connections and purpose in the early days of CERES, the purpose absolutely, and the first thing, as Gil reminds us, was a document that went to a state conference because this was a time of massive unemployment, in particular massive youth unemployment. Thank you. That's it. Yes. Yes. Great. And the idea in that was we shouldn't just be talking about jobs. We should be talking about socially and environmentally useful jobs. So it was about a purpose beyond simply the creation of jobs. And then in that document, we describe a place where those jobs could be explored, experimented with, and demonstrated. And they were the sort of 3 elements of purpose: demonstration, change, new directions, and experimentation. And the connection was absolutely critical. So we've heard a little about, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about the people who CERES drew in very quickly. I'm sad that none of the three founders of the Brunswick Unemployment Group are here. Unfortunately, Barbara Hammond is overseas and we couldn't get hold of Des Freeman or Neville Stern. But Bug was an extraordinary... I'm sorry. Yes, Des Webster, thank you. Some jet lag has to be allowed for right at this moment, please. Because Bug was absolutely essential. It was exploring not beyond the stupid ideas of work for the dole. It was how do we create work that is relevant to that time and to the way that social and environmental change was taking place. Then there was education, the schools. I'm sure we'll hear about some of that from Gil. The universities, RMIT actually designated here as a field station for the Faculty of Environmental Design, Architecture and Building, and we had students up here doing all kinds of things. There was yes, thank you. Aren't you going to lash me? Yeah. The important thing, I think, is there are many organisations, we'll hear about it, community gardens, etc., that came from the local community responding to the opportunity that was here. Yeah. And I think that it's not so much about who they were and so on. It is what was talked about today at the annual general meeting about connection and about, which something is so important now about regenerative social networks, when everything about social networks at present is so alienating and so contested and so much about not bringing people together, the idea of having a place to bring them together. But then I must just finish with hope, because yes, there cannot be a more important time than a place where people go to get hope. We've been going through the evidence, and the universities throughout the world that are involved in this other project all report that for their students, anxiety about the environment, eco-anxiety, and cynicism about the end of nature is dominating the welfare of their students. And that seems to be the way things are at present, and we need hope for a future.
Thanks, Chris. And I do remember the day this great big team of students with hammers in their belts arrived to do the low energy house, and that was from RMIT. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks very much, and what an act to follow. And that actually makes sense in respect with my position in the history in a way, which was that, I came along after this extraordinary group of people had worked for years already with great skill, vision, commitment, everything. And I saw a huge sign that said there's this conference called a search conference about this thing called CERES. And it just glowed, it was like a beacon. And I thought, I'm going to that. Don't ask me why exactly, but it must have been good. So, and the conference itself was terrific. And from then on, it was like, that's like a symbol of what it was like to be part of the conversation of those early days with CERES. It was incredibly stimulating. There was a great deal of hope. There was a great deal of connection. There was a great deal, what was the other one? Purpose. Yeah, and they knew what they were trying to create. I didn't know what I was trying to do at all, but I knew that I fitted in with this group of people. So the values match was there, and I was hooked. And if you hang around at CERES, you got a job. So I got a job, and they gave me a job at the community youth support scheme, because that was all part of the job creation, which was Bug actually. But that was how the money came through the government. And I was the CERES liaison person, so I was kind of really working for CERES. And I actually found it extremely difficult, but it was wonderful and very. I don't suppose I'm finished processing it. It's been an opportunity to have a look at it here. And I want to talk about that crack, though, because I haven't got much time. I've got about a minute left, probably. See what I've got on my pieces of paper. Okay. And look, I just want to say that Genevieve is one of the things that kept me there. You were the anchor, you were the centre of the hub. There was a sense that you knew what was going on, and that somehow were keeping us all safe. I don't know how we were as safe as we were actually on this site.
No.
And I mean, you know, OH&S didn't seem to come into it very much. But Genevieve was there, and was so warm, and you can see that while she's Madame Lash, you know, she's very kind. And that was really helpful to me. Now, I was trying to be a feminist, I was trying to be a community activist. I had no idea how to run a job creation project. I really didn't. And I think that's possibly where, you know, I was really good at acting and pretending I knew what I was doing and making a good show of it. But I think that if I was to go back there now and say, can I add somebody else in who might have made me actually get more done and not feel so full of uncertainty as I did a lot of the time, is that I think there's a place for, once you've hooked in all those marvellous people, and some of them know exactly what they're doing and have the skills, but many don't. And I think that, you know, perhaps we needed a community activist training program. And if I'd known I was in that, I would have been able to admit what I didn't know. And then I would have been able to go and learn from those who did know, and there were a great number of them. But I felt as though I had to know already a bit, so I was trying very hard to look as though I did. So I think that would be the thing, that it may be still relevant today, that people are attracted, they have the values, they have the passion, they have the motivation, they belong. And that you've done the job of filtering, you've got the real people here who are here for the right reasons, but then they aren't necessarily equipped to do the jobs you want them to do. And therefore support for those people and feeding them, training them, you know, until they do flourish. It's just the same as a garden. You can have beautiful plants, but you've got to make the soil good, and you've got to find out what their needs are and help them to grow. And so that's what I think would be a worthwhile thing to learn for the future.
Thanks, Alice.
And I think they're particularly words of wisdom, given that you're a life coach and you understand the...
Well, I had to learn somewhere.
Yeah. So we'll follow straight on with Bruce, who is Alice's partner-in-law. Husband.
I'm her husband, she's my wife. And she came home one day from school and said, "Oh, this bloke Gil Freeman wants you for CERES." At the time I was repairing cameras for a living, and the funny thing is that there is a very interesting parallel happening, because permaculture was launched forth on the world in '78 by David Holmgren and Bill Mollison, and that parallels CERES' rise in that scene so well, because I was very interested in permaculture, and all of a sudden this concept of CERES in Brunswick, in my backyard, came along. And Madame Lash and Graham Harpley and myself transformed this godforsaken site from a Brunswick depot which had blue stones everywhere, paving stones everywhere, and we got it sort of into shape. There's a beautiful picture of Genevieve lugging a 2.5-ton boulder around around the place. But we put that together, and
I think she had a vehicle.
we did have a vehicle. And one of the things that really got us going, I think, was the ability. I did have this ability to get people in on working bees. We used to call them Sunday Fun Day, Get Things Done Day. And we did a lot of work in these working bees, and I hope that sort of gave us the core of what I feel is the main thing with CERES: community. We've got so many wonderful people in the local area in that early time who came in from the Greeks, the Italians, the Turks. They all came in and showed us how to do gardening in the community gardens. This was a wonderful idea. And that really is the thing that got me most interested from the community point of view. And this exciting vision started to take place. It started to evolve. And everything from the stripping of the low energy house, which was a plaster and lath construction inside, and some of the ideas that came in for recreating this house into a passive solar design, wonderful place. And I also wrote a project on low technology job creation for CERES, which involved 5 different projects. Very briefly, they were snail raising to provide snails for the restaurant industry around Melbourne. That didn't get off the ground. You know why? How long do you think a snail takes to get to marketable size? 7 years. True.
Not in our garden.
The worm farm sort of took off. I also looked at the possibility of something like a low technology, small scale compost making things. We made compost. We did all sorts of things that could have created low technology jobs for the young unemployed of Brunswick. That said, we kept going. The vision kept coming. The barriers, red tape.
Yeah.
Can I tell the story about the pond? 1 minute.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. I won't tell the story about the pond. You can tell the pond. Look, I just like to finish by elaborating on Leonard Cohen's Crack and Everything. That's how I like it. It's in Spike Milligan. There are holes in the sky where the rain gets in, but they're ever so small. That's why rain is thin.
Girls should go me.
Yep.
We need to hear Gil's story.
Liz, you haven't had any prep, so I'm not expecting you're going to be
I'm not sure what
ready to roll,
okay,
but
I'm not
say
used
what
to
you
these
want to
things.
say.
Well, my earliest memory, having been involved with setting up community gardens in the 70s, I'd seen how important they were of bringing people from different cultures, different walks of life. Actually, some of them unable to speak the same language. It was a really eye-opening to me. I thought every community health centre should have community gardens as their core function. And then when Genevieve asked me to give a talk to a group of people who were interested in having a community garden up here, I tried to dispel all the myths that everybody would come and steal the veggies and whatever. So to me, that was the beginning of CERES, but we hadn't gone onto the site at that stage. I was working for the Bug in the early days, and I seem to remember there were years and years of bureaucratic wrangling, which Chris and Gil and Genevieve seemed to be able to cut through. I'd say if we didn't have those skills, this would probably be a big housing development. But the essential, what I've learnt from Genevieve was you go out there and you engage people. You door knocked everybody in the area because there was a certain amount of resistance. What's all this? People didn't hippie stuff, bringing these hippies into it, but you turned them into allies, and that's been my important lesson ever since. That you've got to start with getting people coming along with you. Don't come with this nice project, plonk it on the site and say, come on, you can now come and get involved. I think it was the way it evolved organically, very organically. People came with ideas, alternative technology. We hadn't thought about that, but suddenly that was it Mick Harris?
Mick Harris, yeah.
Who wanted some space for his, and the bicycle workshops, and there was just things just happened because someone came along and said, hey, I'd like to do this.
Mike Hill.
And, Mike Hill, he's another one we haven't really acknowledged that he's... And Julianne Reagan, I worked with on the very first pamphlet just to give people a sense of what could be, and everybody said, gee, that's pretty unrealistic or pretty optimistic. You're going to get community gardens and community animals and this and that all around. Well, what happened? It far exceeded whatever that initial plan was. Only just a way of getting people to see the possibilities, but they added on. With the dam, my father being a water engineer, when we were told we couldn't have a dam on a SIP site, he said that's rubbish, and he designed. And so he provided the plans with his name to take off all the responsibility because the council didn't want to be responsible for a dam on a tip that could create all sorts of problems. But there's a way of harvesting excess water that's coming on the site. And it's not a dam, it's a water, it's a pot, well,
It's a wetland.
It's a wetland, yeah, and it would have been a wetland in its original state. Yeah. But, so my parents got involved because they were fascinated by this group. And Mum turned 100 last week. She's still interested. Anyway.
Okay. I started here in Brunswick in 68, 4 schools later. Principal at Brunswick East High, and my role not only was a principal but to be a major troublemaker and keep things moving along. And that's my task, I think. Now I'm going to behave myself. I'm going to have 4 columns. I'm going to deal with each of them. First of all, CERES Centre for Education and Research in Environmental Strategies. That's where it comes from. I'm going to talk about strategies. The first strategy is make sure you've got the solid foundation for a project. And to do that, you have to seek support from the widest possible variety of influences. The ministers of education, the directors of education, the local school principals, the local managers of the Brunswick Unemployment Group, the social welfare system, the whole lot had to be talked about. Now I've looked at my diaries and I've got all of them from those years, and I wonder how Meredith, my partner, brought up the children, because I was at those meetings all the time. She managed, they did. But the important thing I think is, if you're going to develop a project like this, which is innovative, you've got to have a very solid buy-in from the community. And you don't do that on the first day like 1982. You do it from 1986, 85, 84, 83, 82, back to 75. That's when Chris and Neville started to write the program. And thank goodness they did. One of the ideas, and there are 5 of them in that booklet, was the environment park, and I thought that would be fantastic. The second question is, where would we put it? Now, the people who did the investigating, I was one of them, tried for 3 sites. War Park, no good, because they're too small and too heavily invested by the community. Land on Victoria Street, which was owned by the Education Department, was a possibility. But the tip site, how do you wrestle 10 acres out of the council when they know they can do anything with it? Imagine that. 10 acres to the local council, what would they do with it now? It was an empty site. System, so first point, strategy number 1, get a community buy-in. Secondly, were there mistakes and failures? None. Okay. That's easy. Highlights and strengths.
Get some worms.
I think if you get a work party after work party after work party lugging concrete blocks around the site, and you've got probably hundreds of people, you've got the community ready to back you, because you've got hundreds of people locally who've invested themselves and their muscles in the project. That's strategy number 3, relevance. And the last point, relevance. Brunswick Electricity Flow, Roger Lamb, bless his name, Mike Hill, Gil Arnold and myself decided to put a low energy house on the site. Now, they gave me the job of finding one. I found one in Staley Street, next to the Greek church, double fronted, where the board about to be demolished. I said, that's the building. They picked it up, brought it onto the site and started to deal with it as an energy energy efficiency project. Now, that to me was an extraordinary challenge, because they're talking about 10 years before Australia recognised the greenhouse effect in 1993, before the Cairo conference, climate change conference in 1989, before the first COP conference in Berlin in 1995. Now, here's CERES dealing with energy efficiency, removing carbon from the atmosphere 10, 12 years beforehand. So my last point, the last strategy is, if CERES is to survive, it's got to look 10 years, 15 years, 20 years into the future and decide what are the challenges. Solar, in a sense, is sorted. Biodiversity and river maintenance is sorted. We know a lot about them. What are going to be the challenges coming up? And that series of problems. We need an outlook vision. That's what's coming down the track.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Thanks. And I'm pretty sure it's clear to you that there is a wealth of information. We could spend hours diving deep from each of these people, and it feels like a crime not to be able to have people continuing to talk. But tonight's just getting the engine started, so don't worry. And I'm talking about doing something innovative. I remember we started doing collecting recyclable materials was one of our initiatives, and we got it all, trucks and everything, and then we're standing in this huge warehouse with all this cardboard saying, now what are we going to do with it? And the whole kind of, as Gil said, things catching up with where we'd started and doing them much better probably, but cutting into that early thinking was very gratifying over the years to see it come to pass. Jerry's going to make the final call on
Last
what have you got to tell
and
us?
least. I was only involved with CERES for 3 years. The 3 years I lived in Melbourne, I moved away to Tasmania in 1984, and I've been living and working there as a landscape architect. And I guess I'm not even sure how I came to be here at what I think was the first working bee, 1982. We moved a lot of concrete pavers. We created a little sitting circle up by and then later the house came next to it. And it was an amazing day. There's a photo back there. There's people like David Holmgren and his wife. Chris was there. There was a big, tall guy who's, I think, was at MIT. Doug Evans. The fellow who wore the hat all the time. Anyway, there were a lot of David Mays, who is the city architect here in the community.
Can I interrupt? Sita's picked out a guy in one of those photos who she reckons is really hot. And she wants to know who he is and why is he there looking like a Hollywood film star.
Was he wearing a check shirt and a white cap?
Oh. And very small.
Oh. And anyway, I tried to answer Genevieve's questions in the best way possible. I came back to CERES a month ago for the first time in 40 years. Okay. Wow. And it just knocked me out. It just knocks me out what you've done, what all these people have done, the commitment they made over time, the energy they've put in, the heavy lifting, et cetera, et cetera. And to see the crowd tonight and to see a mix of age groups in a crowd, because in Tasmania it seems like only old people go to rallies, only old people go to things like this. So it's really fantastic to see people of all generations here tonight, which is fantastic. So the lesson that I came away with in terms of Genevieve's question is anything's possible. Whatever you put your minds to as a group, however if you work collectively, you work with energy, you work with passion, you work with commitment, you start on a strong foundation, CERES can be anything it wants to be in the future. So that's the lesson I've learned. As far as barriers, I think you made it sound easy, but I don't think in that time in life, and I know I was struggling with ideas of permaculture that I came to from, I read David's book in America, struggling with ideas of sustainability, landscape restoration, those kinds of things. It was a difficult time, and you had to work hard to convince people that these hippie stuff, as somebody mentioned, was real, and it was the future. And if we don't get on it now, we're going to miss the boat. So it's a credit to all these people. Gil Arnold's not here tonight. I understand Gil helped me sell my business, which is really interesting. Connections that continue in life. But the people that put those early efforts in had a lot of work to do because it wasn't, today it's common. Everybody talks about sustainability a lot more. You can now make alliances, and this is my lesson for the future, is to build alliances with other organizations, with other similar like-minded groups, and create a succession plan, make sure that when Nicole retires as the chairman of the board, there's a good person in line to take over from her, and another person and another person, another person. So your idea of training people to take up these positions and bring younger people into it is this what's going to keep it going for 50 years, which is the next challenge. 50 years, that's a long time. A lot of us won't be around to see what that brings, but we want to make sure, you want to make sure that there's people in the queue that'll keep it going for that period of time. So I don't have a lot to say, but I think, invest in your staff, invest in their future as well, and have good systems in place. The governance of the organization is critical. Fundraising is essential. And again, this is about building alliances, and there's a lot of people competing for the same money now. That's the other thing about, sustainability is a watchword. Everybody's into it somewhere, and they all want the same money. So you've got a unique story. You've got a period of a long, good history to draw those funds into CERES. So I congratulate all of you for the efforts, and it's nice to be back and to be amongst some friends and people that I know. And I don't think I'm going to leave 40 more years to come back and visit. Oh, sorry, mistake. Skilled, you did make a mistake. Somebody made a mistake with the compost. Graham was out there from the first day. I'm going to go out there, and he started collecting pita bread from all the Lebanese restaurants in town.
Don't mention pita bread.
Put the pita bread in the soil, in the compost.
In the worms.
And day one, they go to get the test done, and it's saltier than the Salton Sea.
They killed the worms.
Killed the worm. I didn't know that. Anyway, so don't the big mistake. Don't put pita bread in your compost bin.
Don't eat it.
And the stories around the worms, not only that they were salted and died, but we also had we got orders from the Numbi worm farm at one stage, which we couldn't fill because they'd been eaten out by wild bandicoots. And so CERES thought, yes, here we go, a big market in worms, but we didn't quite nail it, did we?
Well, the worms escaped, actually.
Yeah, I reckon the worms spread out over the site. They did more work.
Oh,
yeah, we didn't need to sell them.
Yeah. Can I just go to two people, Ben Rogers and Trudy Wise are sitting there, and I'm just thinking, Trudy, have you got any comments for us about the council? Because
Townsend, who was a councillor. You don't know that person?
Oh, please. Thanks, and I'll finish. We just want to, I think filling out the council role is really important because we haven't got anyone here from the council, but there was a lot going on around that time, that pushing and pulling and giving and taking.
But it wasn't at that stage.
Right up, you want it right up.
Right up there. Like that? Yeah.
Yep.
Right, okay. Well, it wasn't the People's Republic of Brunswick in the 1970s. I mean, the council had been very moribund. The councillors, and I've been doing some work on this lately, a lot of them were, they were all middle-aged men or older, and they'd all been on the council for 20, 30, 40 years, and it didn't really do very much. But then towards the end of the 70s, there was a huge change, and people got elected, such as Gil Arnold, who's been mentioned, who was just an amazing person, and Bernie Barnes. And the two of them recruited other people of a like mind onto the council. So, between sort of 77 and 80, it completely changed. And I was elected in 1979, having been recruited by Gil Arnold without knowing anything much about local government at the time. But anyway, and one of the new projects that Gil was very enthused about, and enthused me as well, was, of course, CERES. So I was under Gil and Bernie's leadership, the council was a great supporter of CERES in that early stage, and organised the original lease from the TIP site, which became CERES, and also the council at that stage had its own electricity supply department. A lot of councils in Melbourne had these from when electricity first was introduced, I suppose, until Kennett got rid of it all in 1994. And the councils used to buy the power in bulk from the SEC and then sell it to their residents, and they'd make quite a lot of money out of it. But in Brunswick's case, we, and with Gil and Bernie's leadership, we used the electricity supply to further various environmental causes. And we were very lucky to have Roger Lamb, who's been mentioned, as the city electrical engineer, and he was also very forward-thinking. So it was with their help that they had the idea of moving their house, which was on land that council bought for a car park in Staley Street, moving the house to the CERES site, which was very undeveloped at that stage, and turning it into the low-energy house. Ironically, the car park, which where the low energy house had been, is now part of land. The next door part of the land has been purchased by the Merri Creek Council for a park, and there's a proposal to turn the car park back into a park, which would be quite interesting. But anyway, so CERES got its start back there because of at the time, very strong support from the Brunswick Council. And that has continued through when it merged into Moreland and then Merri Creek. So the council has always been a sort of good backup for CERES, I suppose. And this 50-year lease is really great news indeed. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'll just, reiterating the importance of council, it strikes me when you look back on universities, schools, education, council, there were so many people in roles, very influential roles, who were prepared to push against the doors and say, I believe in this, let's do it, and turn it into something that it is today. And I wonder how we do that now. Is that what we can do? Do we understand our own influence and advocacy? Ben Rogers, we've got the Keep CERES Humming Fund, and I just wondered, could you tell us about the Inner North Community Foundation, which will be receiving the money? Am I right?
Thanks, Genevieve. I love being voluntold by you to stand up and be in front of people. Good evening. My name's Ben. Thank you to the panel for sharing your insights and your wisdom and your reflections. It strikes me that that at the time there were lots of people in lots of organisations with lots of hats on, where you took what you had to build what you needed, and that continues today. So I think about the Inner North, I think about Merri Creek, and there's 360 odd registered charities, powered by volunteers, powered by people who turn up at this time of year for AGMs. Many of you will have been at AGMs for different organisations that you're involved with in these weeks. And I think about the different ways that people make contributions. Hearing you speak, CERES at the time seemed to be an open platform for people to come and to experiment and to chip in for things that they found important. That it wasn't centering one person's way of being, but saying there are lots of ways that we need to see change in the world, and when there are lots of contributions that people can make, and whether you can carry concrete, whether you can release worms away from their prisons into the greater soil. There are lots of different things that we need people to do, and I think that stuff continues. The Inner North Community Foundation is a philanthropic trust for Melbourne's Inner North. Over the last 18 years, local people and businesses have chipped in $13 million into a perpetual endowment for the region. That's nice. What I think is more important is the reflection of values and about how local people are reflecting the things that they care about through their generosity. One of the funds that we have, we've got 45 funds at the moment. One of the funds that we have is a CERES fund, and the idea being that over time, people will chip in for a CERES fund and it'll generate an annual untied operational grant that'll keep the lights on and provide a base support so that in, what were you saying, Nicole, 2075, kids will be here doing important stuff. Come have a chat. Thanks and congrats.
So I'm tempted to lock the doors and stay and say we're staying for another 2 hours, but I know I can't do that without permissions. So we have to press pause, and we are anticipating in 2026 there'll be more opportunities. We'll be more thoroughly versed in the details of history, but also the momentum that we're starting to build with tonight. There's a list here where we're saying any information is welcome. Who are the people? And we've got a draft report, don't worry. Who are the people that we want to note as key influences, key movers and shakers, all the way through to 2025? And Hattie, you could be one of them. Then we've got the dates. What are the critical dates in the evolution of CERES, so that we can be sure we've captured every part? Saying that there were different sites is an interesting thing. We also want to know the organisations, which ones got going and started and were part of that early movement. Any documents that people have, we're really loving the moths flying out of folders as people bring them to us, and any media, which is the evidence that we really were terribly breaking all the rules on workplace health and safety in the early days, because we definitely didn't comply. Now, if you've got anything that you want to add to any of this, if you want to find out about Keep CERES Humming, you go to comms@ceres.org.au, that's the email, but there's also this marvellous QR code system. Is Dre here? Yeah, there she is, she's waving. So Dre's got some material down the back, and you just, as we know, put your phone and everything's magic, and you can get onto the CERES website, which is ceres.org.au. So don't feel that you can't keep contributing. We have to press pause tonight, but any contributions, conversations, any more discussions, you're welcome to stay on as we break up. But just before we finish, I've got some thank you olive oil for the panel. And I know it's, do you want to do those? Yeah. And I know people have spent, I don't need that, people have spent a lot of time thinking about tonight, putting in their ideas and, yeah, just distilling what it is that all that history was about. And we really appreciate the work that people have done to get here tonight and share. And I hope we can continue to involve all of you and see where we go from here. So thanks very much. Let's say a big thank you. And then...
Thank you.
Yeah. Over to Nicole.
Thanks, Genevieve. This is totally unprepared, but I felt really... Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I felt really moved to thank the panel tonight. And I was reflecting, we talked about the 45-year history. In the AGM earlier, we talked about thinking 50 years ahead, as Ben said, to 2075, and the children that will be visiting CERES in that year. And from kind of standing here in the middle and seeing everyone in the room, what really struck me is, and I hope nobody will take offence at this, but how rarely we get to sit and listen to elders and listen to the many, many years of wisdom in this group here tonight. And so I'm so deeply grateful to have the opportunity to do this with you, to listen to you speak tonight. I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope I can thank them on behalf of everyone in the room. And I often slip into weird metaphors. So the metaphor that occurs to me tonight is very like tall people, giants, with their head in the clouds, you can see a long, long way. You imagined what the future could be like with this incredible place here. That's extraordinary. And your feet planted deep, deep in the soil. It's such a beautiful thing to be with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve.
That's it. Go away. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. My pleasure.